I'll start.
Start.
I'm recording.
And at the duck.
I think I've seen all of them. Oh.
Screen down there.
Matt, can you put that screen down? Is that,
I don't know why I didn't keep track. Was waiting to start recording, so.
We're recording now. Are we recording? Yes, thank you.
All right, I want to welcome everyone. This is City of Cottonwood Heights. It's just after 5 p.m. Sorry to be 5 minutes late. My name is Mayor Mike Peterson. This is our work session for Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. If people have not declared their candidacy by now, they're too late. And just real quickly for the record, I think it's just a side note. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candidates for mayor, 7 candidates for District 3, 7, and then 3 candidates for District 4. And you can talk later, we'll show you those names. But anyway, looking at your agenda, the first item on the agenda, and our agenda is packed, so we'll try and be judicious and move right along, but still give adequate time to all the agenda items. We have our friends from Brooksea here, and we'll talk about the marathon that's scheduled for September. Is that right?
September 11th.
September 9th. So Jared, are you going to lead off?
If you're ready for me.
We're ready. Let's go.
Great. So my colleague Troy here, I think, is going to share.
Maybe you can introduce Troy. We've
Sure,
met Troy before.
Troy Wheeler. Troy comes to us from Ragnar Relays. I think a lot of
We've
people
heard
are
of
familiar
Ragnar.
with Ragnar. So he's accustomed to dealing with 200-mile routes. So 26.2 ain't no deal for him. No, he'll do a great job, and will be helping oversee a lot of the traffic control and other things of that nature. Where would you like me? I don't know if do I need to be
Just right up there in front, right up
Okay.
there, yeah. Stay 6 feet from the chief.
Absolutely. I'll be quick. I know that there's a package on it tonight, so mainly here to answer questions. The point is it's status quo. There is very little, if anything, that has changed from the 2019 operations plan. Obviously, we weren't around for an event in 2020. Paul can mention anything that needs to be mentioned in terms of changes, but
just quickly, the operation plan is going to be the same, but just the highlights would be that we open northbound and southbound traffic on Wasatch at 9 a.m. It'd be limited northbound, it'll be open full on southbound at that point in time. The route shuts down starting about 5 a.m. down to Fort Union Boulevard to facilitate us getting it set up. First runner out of the canyon at 7:30 will shut Wasatch hard close. It's about 7. So the route will open up at 1 o'clock. So other than that, nothing has changed.
I understand historically, and we've been around for a few years, that the biggest improvement from 18 to 19 was how soon we opened up Wasatch. That was critical. I think
yes.
19 was-
Yeah, so we ended up using 2 barricade companies instead of 1.
Yeah.
That allowed the barricade provider to pick up much more quickly. They weren't waiting with all their trucks in a different area. So it's essentially just one massive crew that moves from east to west down Fort Union. We have PD support to keep vehicles away while we do that and get them picked up right behind the last runner.
The other important point I think we improved on over the years was we had concerns for our businesses on Fort Union. And I know previously you've knocked on doors and giving them incentives to market in your packets and things like that. Is that being done?
Correct. Yeah. So let me speak to that. This Friday, our team is going out. We'll spend the entire day on Friday taking care of that. So every business is visited in person. They'll get a flyer that explains.
You need to mute your.
We had concerns for our businesses on
Can you mute?
Where's Paul?
Matt.
Matt.
We're trying to figure out his computer.
I apologize. This Friday, or
So stop your share for a second. Hit your share again. And then, hold on. So share sound wasn't on.
Shut down. It's the
Is there a song going on?
I apologize. This Friday.
So stop your share for a
Seems
second.
to be delayed by about 30 seconds.
Yeah, hit your share again. Share sound wasn't on.
We're experiencing technical difficulties. But it's on.
The purpose, one is to inform them of what's going on, make sure that they know how to get around race day traffic. And then purpose number two is to invite them to participate in the advertising opportunities. We had 31 businesses take advantage of it in 2019. So it's anywhere from a free booth at the expo to an online ad that we do on social media or an email blast. People take advantage of it in different ways. We did, at the outset of COVID, inform them of what's going on.
we sent out a draft and a memo analysis in the council packet that has a lot of the same information on this. So if there's points you want to cover, just interrupt me and let me know. And we can jump to wherever the council wants to discuss. But I do want to start out, this is the lead in the memo as well. And we are recommending that we make a recommendation to UDOT that we prefer one alternative over the other. And based on the staff analysis, we would recommend supporting the enhanced bus alternative over the gondola alternative. And we can explain some of the findings and the basis for that recommendation as we go through here. But we're also recommending numerous revisions and updates to the preferred alternatives, both to the bus alternative, but also under two broader categories of roadway design and corridor aesthetics, and then corridor mobility and local access. So that's kind of how this is broken up. So interrupt me, like I said, I've got summaries here of each alternative and then some bullet points on each of the design and roadway comments and the local access comments, but I won't go over the whole thing here. This is all publicly available on UDOT's website, but this is the enhanced bus alternative. And at a high level, I'll just work north to south. Under this alternative, UDOT would propose to construct a 1,500 parking stall mobility hub at the gravel pit. That hub would become the primary transit stop for anyone coming from the northwest, essentially, to Little Cottonwood Canyon. And then buses would run just one route. You'd have an Alta bus and a Snowbird bus, and they would go from the hub to the resort and back to the hub and just do that loop with no stops in between. You would also have the same thing occurring from 94 South and Highland Drive with the intent to capture traffic to the southwest of this location. On Wasatch Boulevard itself, sorry.
You're in peak, so this is basically some wintertime service, especially when or ski buses basically is.
This would be, yeah, peak hour. So this whole analysis for both alternatives is to accommodate peak winter demand, and it projects out demand into 2050. So this is demand over time and at those peak periods.
Does it address summertime uses in the canyons?
No, well,
just
the analysis is for Little Cottonwood Canyon, so it does address some of those improvements, and some of our feedback is very specific to accommodating those summertime uses or uses elsewhere. That flexibility. So on Wasatch Boulevard, under this alternative, actually under both alternatives, the proposal on Wasatch Boulevard in Cottonwood Heights does not change. They are proposing roadway widening, adding capacity, and what they've stated in their EIS, and I'll show it in a different document, but yeah, go ahead.
no, okay, I was thinking
Okay.
cross sections.
So I've got cross sections later. I'll come back to this to demonstrate what they're proposing in terms of widening. They are not proposing a bus running shoulder lane on Wasatch, other than at turn signal locations. The buses by design will be able to clear out turn lanes, preempt traffic at stoplights, and jump back into the general travel lanes.
So meaning the two southbound lanes, neither will be dedicated to buses, except if the bus is near one of those areas. They can
So if the
preempt.
yeah, correct. The two southbound lanes that they're proposing under this imbalanced solution
So they didn't take the car,
they'd be vehicle travel lanes, and then the bus could go in the turn lane and go.
but I
through
think
the
ours
signal.
was like, you
Yeah.
can have this extra lane if
Right. We recommended something a little different that I also have a slide on. Two other
This
things.
is what they are,
This is their alternative.
this is their
This is
proposal.
the bus
for what?
proposal. Yep.
For their bus proposal.
Sometime after, so going through the High T intersection, this will, as this road continues south and up the canyon, they are proposing to construct a peak period shoulder lane. So an additional lane of travel that will be dedicated to buses only during peak hours. And what they're saying is that shoulder in non-peak hours is not another vehicle lane. It's a pedestrian and bicycle lane.
just from the high T To the.
Just where it's a dedicated bus lane, yeah, south of the high T intersection and up the canyon.
When you say additional lane,
Mhm.
additional to the 5 or? inclusive?
No, so to the south, it would be a travel lane in each direction and then a bus lane in each direction. And I don't
need to get to the cross section.
just, yeah, just to get to the high T or from the high T up the resort.
Because there's a lot of comments coming in about 7 lanes and freeways and
Yeah.
all sorts of things that aren't actually, that aren't in here, so.
Yep, so I'll show cross sections when we get to kind of the design feedback.
Is anything for powder days, we'll say, is anything enhanced for that? Or is it the same each day throughout the winter?
Well, I think that the design and the intention here is that these will cover those high demand powder days. These alternatives are designed to accommodate those busiest days of the year.
Except when the road is closed and it gets backed up.
Sure, yeah. So both alternatives actually propose avalanche sheds in the, the areas, the common areas hit by avalanches. So that is in the gondola alternative.
That
and
was a
this one.
surprise to me.
Mhm.
I thought the gondola would not put that on sheds
Right.
in, but UDOT is being firm that they need to be there either way, and that's like a 50, 60.
Yeah, that was like
$60 million.
Yeah.
Snow
That was
sheds
supposed
is
to reduce-
86 million.
86
according to the
million.
stock.
Now it's 86.
Wow.
To give you an amount of how many closures that would prevent each year.
It may be in there. I don't have it on the top.
I
of my
mean,
head.
it was like a lot. Because a lot of those happen in the same spot.
So how many sheds were in total?
I think there's,
6?
That's how long they are.
yeah. I can verify that. The last thing I'll point out here, total cost to implement is 510 million and then 11 million operation maintenance costs for the bus solution. And then you can see the travel time is 36 minutes. And that would be boarding at the mobility hub, getting on the buses straight up the canyon. So 36 minutes. This is kind of a graphic that shows they're accounting for about 12 minutes from when you park at the mobility hub and get in the bus. Another 20 minutes driving and 4 minutes to get to the resort.
So that one transfers from your parked car to the bus.
Correct.
Again, the mobility hub is 94 South and gravel pit.
Correct. The 94 South under this scenario is 1,000 parking stalls and the gravel pit is 1,500. Okay, let's move on. This is more information. I can come back. But so this is, again, some of the supporting rationale for why we feel the bus alternative more closely complies with kind of the vision of the Wasatch Master Plan. And I'll get to this when I go over the gondola option as well, but the estimated travel time for the gondola alternative, even parking at the proposed gondola station, is 55 minutes. And the estimated time to drive up the canyon is only 37 minutes. So it takes quite a bit longer under UDOT's calculations to ride the gondola to the resort than it does to drive. And that's somewhat concerning. Whereas when you're on a bus, that it's about the same travel time, but when you add in what UDOT was discussing in terms of tolling and other transit incentives, that seems to become a little more appealing than almost adding 2/3 onto your wait time. The bus alternative also provides a lot more long-term flexibility. It provides a legitimate solution, a transit solution to get from the valley or the down here up to the resorts on ski days, but it also would allow for stops at trail locations, canyon usage in the summer, and you can change bus routes to accommodate demand. And it also has future potential to benefit Big Cottonwood Canyon with the investment required in buses. Those buses can go different areas at different times. This isn't all stated in the EIS, but this is something that we feel is critical. This also could provide year-round commuter transit solutions. So, the Wasatch Master Plan envisions the potential for the mobility hub at the gravel pit to be able to accommodate northbound traffic as well. To Research Park, the U, Foothill Drive. This provides a legitimate pathway to work towards that, where the gondola solution does not do that quite as well. And then the ongoing cost of the bus alternative is somewhat tempered by the flexibility that the bus alternative provides. We also feel that UDOT must incentivize bus usage and disincentivize vehicular traffic. I've talked about tolling already, which is one way to do it, but we recommend that UDOT explore other options like, essentially creative solutions, opening the canyon or the resorts earlier for transit riders, exploring, discounted lift tickets, some sort of incentive to ride the bus beyond just tolling the road. We felt that UDOT, they got fairly creative in their gondola alternative and didn't go quite as far in the creativity level on the bus alternative, but we think they could. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Because the gondola alternative requires substantial public-private partnership, and it hasn't been, the bus alternative hasn't been explored to that level to really make that bus option an appealing option. But we think they can.
Well,
They
not
can
just
get
in
there.
that, but even in how the buses are used inside the buses, because again, the
Right.
complaint is who wants to ride a bus versus a gondola.
Right.
But you need to make those buses more palatable to skiers and others.
Free, they need to be free.
Sure, yeah. Any incentive that will get people on the bus and out of the vehicle is critical.
When you say public-private partnership with the gondola, can you help me? Like, are you-
Yeah, we've heard, that with private landowners to build the station, with resorts to subsidize costs. If the gondola structure itself, there've been numerous presentations by Doppelmayr and different gondola providers. And I don't know that the bus alternative has gotten that same creative approach and creative thinking to make a bus seem more appealing than a typical city bus seems.
Do you know, I know it's not in here, was a BRT type thing looked at all?
As in a dedicated bus lane? Well, that's what our plan recommended. And
That's what we originally
Yeah.
said.
yeah,
That's what
Um,
that other lane would be for.
and yeah,
The reason I asked it, because in conjunction with what Kelly said, the BRT between UVU and down to Provo, BYU and stuff is just,
Yeah.
usage is enormous because they got a grant to run it free for a couple of years and everyone used it. It's crazy and it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, keep a $20 toll before 10 a.m.
right.
or a free bus.
Free bus, sure.
Yeah. That'll put you in a bus.
And then lastly on this, there are a few more points in the letter, but I've just kept it at this to summarize for this discussion. The bus solution implementation should be properly phased to accommodate demand and need over time. You can kind of ramp up into this when you're looking at the bus alternative instead of the gondola. So to briefly go over the other alternative, just to provide this context. Similar somewhat to the bus alternative, it does provide mobility hubs, but it's much more scaled down. So 600 parking stalls at the gravel pit and 400 at 94th and Highland. And then adds a transit stop or a parking structure at the actual proposed gondola station location, which is just south of the Granite Oaks subdivision within Cottonwood Heights boundaries. Under this proposal, they're saying 1,500 parking stalls at that location. It's not clear if the mobility hub under this scenario is a structure or not, and we want to get that clarification because it is substantially fewer parking stalls than the.
Say that again.
I'm
not sure.
If the 600 parking stalls is a surface lot or a structure at the gravel pit location, and that's, we want to get clarification. Right, we're very
Yeah,
concerned about that.
I thought I heard it clearly.
It may be, but I don't know, and it's not clear in the documentation, so we're still looking at that, but
The
that does.
rendering you saw that it was a couple levels. structure.
Right,
At least.
so that's potentially a concern that we need to verify. Again, I'll point out that the travel time, even driving and parking right at the base station, is 55 minutes as opposed to 38 minutes to drive a personal vehicle, which, like I stated before, becomes a concern of, you'll get people riding the gondola. Certainly people think it's a cool new concept, but will that ridership continue over time? When factoring in cost of riding the gondola, tolling, that kind of stuff. And when the gondola is at capacity or the parking structure, these mobility hubs would function similarly, except rather than the bus taking up the canyon, the bus would take you to the gondola station. Again, no widening at the canyon. It's okay.
It's been a long time since we've seen this.
Yeah, that's great.
What is that?
Randy Cars we talked about. Yeah.
Hell, Mike, talk louder.
So, under the gondola alternative, no road widening south of the high T. Obviously, the gondola infrastructure would be placed there, though, the towers for the train cars or whatever they're called. One of the limiting factors that we've identified with this alternative is there are only supposed to be 2 stops with the gondola outside of the base station, and that is at Snowbird and at Alta. So we feel there's limited flexibility with this, especially in the off season.
I mean, I think it's clear that most people are probably going to the ski resort.
Well,
But there are other people that use the canyon.
yeah, the diversified recreation is increasing, not just in that camp, but on both campuses. Yeah.
So this is where we have a caveat. I got it in my head that I heard somewhere it was potentially a surface lot, so I will verify that, but we are concerned if that's the case. The gondola alternative seems to fail to remove any traffic from Wasatch Boulevard unless someone is parking at the smaller mobility hub and taking a bus to the gondola station
Then you
and the
have to
gondola
transfer
up.
twice.
Right. And with 1,500 cars at the gondola station, it just seems the path of least resistance will be to drive down to that station.
Yeah,
and
your
park.
first one's gonna be there, and if that's
So-
full, then you might have to turn around.
So certainly it'll alleviate traffic in the canyon, but not leading to the canyon. Any delays? We've kind of heard this a few times and looked into this a little bit, but delays caused by canyon closures can still impact gondola travel time because, on the very, very bad days when the canyon's closed, the cars back up to the freeway, cars will still not be able to get to the gondola station. So there will still be a delay under the gondola alternative. And it is in the EIS that during active avalanche mitigation, gondola will not be operational. So when they're actively mitigating, that will still be closed, causing a wait time, obviously, which is that's a good solution. You don't want to fly the gondola over the mortars, but it's important to point out. We also feel the parking structure at this location is more likely to be underutilized during off hours and off season due to its kind of isolated residential location rather than at the gravel pit where it's integrated into a mixed use type development that we're envisioning.
I thought it was the same place. It's not where was
The
it?
mobility hub is there, but it's only 600 stalls. I'm talking about the 1,500
Oh, at the
stall
gondola
structure
base?
at the base
Okay.
station.
All right. Yes.
And as we talked about, the gondola is a substantial investment that only stops at 2 locations. So there's a lot more limited flexibility. There's also potential encroachment into the preserved city open space. We've made this very clear with UDOT that they need to remain outside of that. But that still becomes a concern there with all of that transit activity in that location.
Mike, are the buses only going to go to Snowbird and Alta, or will they stop up the canyon? We know that.
Well, under the bus alternative, during the peak winter days, they would go direct from Canyon to Mobility Hub. But what we're saying is you have a bus, if it's not a peak day and there's not demand for X number of buses to go to the stations, or it's the summer, you could reroute those buses to stop at trailheads or other places.
There's just a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at Big Cottonwood Canyon.
And the last point here before we move on is that the city kind of bears the brunt of the impact of the gondola with little benefit in return. So I'll move now to corridor mobility and local access, and then we'll end with the roadway design and aesthetics discussion, because I know that's
Yeah, we need to spend
one of the priorities. Yeah.
Yeah.
So briefly on this, we still continue to feel that neighborhood access and safety is critical, and we're recommending stronger emphasis on safe neighborhood ingress and egress. They previously eliminated the idea of a signalized intersection at Kings Hill Drive, but we're recommending they bring that back as part of the design of the roadway. We're not sure why that needs to be cleared in the EIS. And
Just
it
make
can't
sure
be-
that people understand what you're saying. The bottom of Kings Hill Drive, like just before you,
just right after the fire station
So they, just before the fire, well,
or before, depending on which way you're coming.
South up.
yeah, so what you're saying is that we're gonna recommend that bring that back for discussion during the design process, even though they've eliminated.
We recommend not eliminating traffic calming measures such as the signalized
So we
intersection,
get into design.
roundabouts, other traffic calming measures until we get to the design phase. We're not sure why they eliminated that, but still want to talk other design measures at this point.
Yeah, I've heard several comments on.
So yeah, that's the critical one. They are improving sight distance there, and we're also requesting a better understanding of what that looks like and how that will improve safety, but we want to revisit that.
What would it take to get them talking roundabout?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly, but that's something we want to put back on the table. It is in our Wasatch master plan. Again, this,
It's not like a weird concern is the slope.
there may be some grading with a roundabout, but you can do roadway, chicanes and jogs. There can be solutions, but
We know what the
again,
capacity, I'm looking at the capacity on, you can only go so far. But I'll see what the capacity, or what the traffic counts up there.
sure.
Again, that's part of the design.
We stress this at every level in almost every meeting we've had with UDOT dating back to the Wasatch Master Plan. Continue to feel strongly that roadway speed should be reduced through posted speed limit and roadway design. Now that's been consistent. That hasn't changed.
I'm gonna push a button again. I know
Yeah.
you've heard it 100 times. Is based upon what Josh has told us, that they cannot deal with speed in EIS. But as we questioned here, not that we're here, I said, but we can imply or make it very clear in EIS, design components that would require reduced speeds. And that's what we need to articulate
Right.
in our response.
Right.
With the focus on speed, we can incorporate that.
Yeah, and the next,
I think you also want to reaffirm or talk about decibel levels, because I specifically included that in our comments in Wasatch Boulevard plan.
yeah, it is in there.
Yeah, good point.
We heard from Josh at the last, when he was here presenting, that they stopped the shared use path at the high T because of the city's open space parcel. I've added a draft comment that says, that a shared use path is not in violation of a preservation easement. So we've recommended that continue through
Good point.
the high T intersection. Especially if they're going to add a pedestrian or shoulder lane for buses that can be used by pedestrians in the off season. You could potentially have a pedestrian trail from the ski resorts all the way to Big Cottonwood Canyon. We've asked that they revise references to pedestrian bridges and just replace it with grade separated crossings. That provides a little more flexibility when we look at how people safely cross the road. Depending on where the locations of those crossings end up, it could be a bridge, but it could be something that goes underneath the road that's a little less intrusive. Yeah.
I've been asking a lot of people, constituents, what they would prefer. If you
Yeah.
drive along Wasatch and 215 going out and see the one going to Churchill Junior High, that ugly pedestrian crosswalk.
Yeah.
Then you see a nice one down by Parties. But then I'm saying, what if you didn't have either one of those, you went underneath? Wow, as long as it was lit and felt safe.
And the Big Cottonwood Trail does this, a similar thing, just farther to the north. So.
As long as we don't get any of those big red rocks like Sugar House Park.
Yeah. Again, design's critical in that process. Beyond the grade separated crossings, there are other signalized locations, and we are stressing that safety need to be improved for those at grade crossings as well. Whether that, enhancing crosswalks, more visible crossing signals that alert cars earlier that there are people crossing, pedestrian refuge areas, in medians, that kind of thing. And then including trail wayfinding signage on the shared use path that will really allow that shared use path to feel more than a large sidewalk and more like an integrated part of the city regional trail system. So there are a few more in the memo, but that's the high level overview of those comments. And now I've got a few slides to talk about roadway design and aesthetics.
Is it now? Mike had a great idea that he showed me the other day when we talk about the importance of all these subjects. And maybe you're going to bring it up regarding MOU or something.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, first bullet point here. So So we've been told and conveyed to residents in the council in the past that roadway design is typically not part of an EIS process. It happens after a record of decision has been reached. We understand that, but we will also be requesting or suggest that we request as a city some sort of signed agreement or memorandum of understanding with UDOT during this phase of the process that essentially commits to the city and UDOT working together on both roadway design and aesthetics, that they're determined in a collaborative manner, spelled manner wrong, following kind of the principles and the tenets of the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan, but also of UDOT's own aesthetics, corridor aesthetics and design plan that sort of took the ideas in the Wasatch Master Plan and helped visualize them, that I'll show.
Why I think that is so important is because if you look over the last 2+ years, from our first meeting here was John Thomas about speed, and then we went through and got commitments from Carlos, and then Josh comes in. Everything keeps getting tweaked a little bit. I think the MOU, where we can put the tenets of our plan with the EIS stuff that we can pass on to those coming after us, both on UDOT side as well as the city side.
Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah, so-
interesting to see how they respond.
And in the EIS, they do reference the Wasatch Master Plan and their aesthetics, their corridor design plan. Just this takes it a step further and affirms their commitment,
Yep.
their verbal commitment that they've already expressed to us.
And
Puts
some
it
in
in
writing, but.
Yeah.
And don't we have, I thought they allocated $10 million to Wasatch Boulevard specifically for remember that years ago, there was like the 70
Aesthetics.
million, then there was a 10 million.
Well, there was 100 million total, but you're right. And that was part of that. You're right. Yeah.
So is that,
That was part of the snow sheds, or
No, well,
wasn't it? And then they line item.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
bunch of snow
the
shed.
point is, it was some initial money they had to do some design work and some improvements, but yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Is
it's like-
anybody having the conversation about the changes to commuter patterns in light of the pandemic? Because this is all 2015 traffic studies, right?
But yeah, and this projects out into 2050. Yeah.
But we
it
saw
was.
substantial changes, like people working from home,
Mhm.
tremendous amount of changes.
Sure.
Is there any way to get UDOT to go to spin their wheels backwards and reevaluate, do a new study on traffic?
We can certainly request that they provide detail on how.
I mean, who else knows a handful of people that now work from home who didn't used to? I do.
But I think part of the process, when we're talking 2050, there will be need for additional. That's what's so good about busing, is it's so flexible. You may do busing for 5 years and we modify it again, and it'll keep changing. It'll change based upon those studies, and I'm sure that we'll see more going ahead.
but I think what Tally's hitting on, which is what we hear from Josh Van Dura all the time, is that the only reason why they're adding that second lane southbound is for commuter traffic, peak commuter traffic evening heading south,
If
right?
needed.
Well, we said we need it, but he didn't, I mean, they took out the northbound second lane, but they haven't taken out the southbound.
Right.
That's why they're adding that other bus lane from the high T that got to the gondola, because that's all for commuter traffic. So what Tally points out is, you said that we hit a level of service of F or whatever it is, which is why we need that southbound lane, but do we actually have traffic patterns changed? And I think from our perspective, we've always commented that it makes no sense to have those two lanes that end up in a 1-lane road when you make the right turn at Lakai through Cottonwood Heights, because it goes back to 1 lane. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
you could always include a comment.
Yeah.
Suggest reevaluating. or-
See how
or
current levels of service.
confirming.
Well, and they would have data from last year, and they'll have data
Just
from this year real
confirm
soon on
Sure.
what actual.
That's good. Yeah, because their data in the EIS, their show from when they did that study, that portion of Wasatch is failing right now.
That's
but
a
to just
fairly
confirm.
easy amendment to make. I mean, a
I mean,
traffic
things
study.
could look so different by 2050. We could have autonomous vehicles that run people from their house to the public transit station.
Yep.
And just do that all day, every day. Personal ownership of cars could go down significantly by 2050.
Well, it's the use of electric vehicles too, electric
Yeah.
buses.
But I think anything we could do to point them back to our master plan, which is like, if it's not needed, or you should be using that second lane as it does. I mean, if our comments are gonna be talking about incentivizing the buses, we should be reminding them, that's why we gave you the second lane.
Right.
Because we want you to we want people to use the buses
As a flex.
as a flex lane. And when it's not being used as a flex lane, I could be riding my bike to work or whatever. I mean,
If we had safe biking lanes, electric bikes go really far, really fast.
and that's why I think it's important that if we can include some of those visuals where we show like, this is what 13 piece looks like. This is what
Yeah.
7 piece looks like. This is what foothill looks like. This is where we're heading. Even if you stick some medians in the middle, we're still gonna end up on like 7 piece in
If you
Sugar
build it,
House,
they will
Liberty
come.
Park, right? Everybody's been there in the last
Well,
year.
That's, yes, but not entirely. If you
Well,
build
Did you look at the-
10,000 houses, they're gonna be there anyway.
Did you look at the
Okay.
EIS pictures? Pictures in the EIS?
Yeah, I've got a few of those, and I've got a
It's
few of
7 feet.
those roads. And they're just in a couple slides here. So I'll just get through these points here, and then we can talk about all of that. Again, reduce speeds through roadway design and posted speed limit, reiterating it again. There are a few sections within the EIS that, do reference roadway design and the Wasatch Plan and, that kind of thing, but we're asking them, proposing to ask them to revise and clarify those sections, especially the roadway design section. Talks right now that there's a way to reduce design speed by limiting the amount of asphalt in the shoulder. They can reduce that clear zone area. So we certainly suggest that they do that. But also include references, because right now this section references, the roads are designed following UDOT's standard and process, but we understand that a little differently. That not that long ago, Wasatch was determined to be a special gateway corridor. I can't remember the language they used, that will be treated and looked at a little differently than their typical process. So we're asking them to acknowledge that within the EIS, which we feel is a reasonable request, which would result in a slightly different and more unique design process than the typical procedure that they go through. Just for clarification, we're also asking them to attach as appendices the Wasatch Master Plan and UDOT's Corridor Design Aesthetics Plan. Revise the aesthetics section of the EIS to be roadway design and aesthetics. It's a minor difference, but it does have some different meaning and connotation. And revise the label of the 5-lane widening to 5-lane phased approach. Something talking about the 5-lane widening is they're clearing it for that 5 lanes, but only implementing the imbalanced solution initially.
I didn't really understand that. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? They're
Well, at the
cleaning it-
environmental level, you have to clear any roadway widening. So what we were told is they're clearing enough corridor that one day they could potentially expand and implement the full
So then they
5-lane
could just
cross
put-
section.
They could just put the asphalt down or?
Yeah, although they don't plan to, if they only cleared the imbalanced solution right now and then wanted to implement 5 lanes later down the road, they'd have to go through another
Another
EIS
EIS.
process.
So this says, we'll do the EIS for the whole thing now. And then if we want to expand it later, that part will have
Yeah,
already been
that's
addressed.
how it's been explained to me.
But I understand too, when we talk about right of way, there's not need for additional right of way. They have enough.
So under both imbalanced and 5-lane, the little right of way they've had to acquire, it was, they purchased one property already in the Kings Hill kind of area
Is it
for
the White
Clearview.
House?
I don't know, but it was purchased like 2 years ago. So it's been purchased.
On the east side.
The west side?
Yeah,
Is it the east side or the
I
west
think
side?
it's on the east side.
The west side, that's the.
You know the White House I'm talking about? Is
Yeah,
that-
on the west side in the church property.
Yeah.
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 That no one lives in, but they.
Yeah.
That work
Who
last
knows
week.
what it is, yeah, they rented it out for a while, but.
Yeah.
So it's on the house.
It's on the east side. It has to do with the site visibility of
Yeah,
the
and that
oncoming
corner,
traffic
yeah.
right at that intersection. But with their proposed approach to the imbalanced 5-lane, designation or solution, we're requesting that they increase the threshold needed to trigger the widening from imbalance to a 5-lane road. Right now, they're saying that that's triggered if and when that road hits level of service E or F. And their data right now shows that level of service E or F is not projected even in 2050. But we are requesting that only be considered if there's level of service F over a prolonged period of time and after coordination with Cottonwood Heights before they take any action there. So in other words, if it hits level of service F one day in 2050, right, that shouldn't be enough to merit widening it. And maybe they have-
Of every, or it's on the weekday.
you know, sustained over time, yearly traffic kind of thing. Again, trying to disincentivize that added capacity as much as we can. We've talked about this previously, but we would request that UDOT reconsider and reanalyze traffic calming measures that were previously eliminated. So roundabout chicanes, signalized intersections, other traffic calming design measures. All of these recommendations are clearly referenced in the Wasatch Master Plan and we feel should not be eliminated at this phase of the project during the EIS. That should be a design phase consideration and discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at least what UDOT's saying, the capacity on their single lane roundabout from at least Big Cottonwood to Little Cottonwood Canyon should be feasible. Big fan of single lanes, the double lanes, not
Sure.
quite as much.
So what traffic calming have they?
Or is that
Do they
just,
clear it all?
No, because they've indicated that's all part of the design,
That's
how they design the road.
So here we're saying it's not just reconsider.
Well, but what they previously, during the scope and analysis, one of the previous levels said, hey, we looked at roundabout, but we've eliminated that as an option. And we looked at signalizing that Kings Hill intersection, but we've eliminated that as an option.
Do you, well, I guess it's presentation and semantics, but I would just try and not put them all, lump them all in the same boat.
Sure, yeah.
To say, maybe you can mention them individually.
Yep.
You may not get roundabouts, but you may look at the signal lighting differently
Mhm.
or other mediums and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
It's too easy just to cross on the whole section.
Yeah.
Did they say why they crossed that off?
Probably. I don't have an
Sorry,
answer
it's a
for
big,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I apologize to ask.
I mean, if the only one is just because it's not this point in the process, then even in our letter, we can say we would still like to see these items included
Revisit it.
in your design process.
Any sound wall, we've been informed, and there was I think a poster at their open houses that said, you know, based on the sound levels today, there are some sound walls merited. There's a process for implementing those, and the residents adjacent to them vote on whether they want them to go in or not. But those should also be reviewed under the same collaborative design process as we're recommending is done for the rest of the corridor. And then finally, the Wasatch Master Plan views Wasatch Boulevard as a recreational natural corridor and discourages commercial redevelopment. This kind of touches on that negative impact associated with a gondola station. That's a pretty commercial type building in a very residential area, and is a little bit at odds with the, well, more than a little bit at odds with the Wasatch Master Plan. So that's a quick summary of the comments, bullet point in the staff letter. If there are additional suggestions or input, please let me know. We've got a few weeks.
Well,
But I'll go over, I've got some graphics now to
Okay,
just
and
go
also
through.
we'll send out a draft to the council of this. It's already.
Well, the memo that was in the council packet is essentially the draft.
Okay.
We can send that out individually, so
If
it's
there's
not in the
anything
middle of
that-
the
if
council
there's anything
packet.
you're modifying today, that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
We'll include
Yep.
it as a.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because I've seen, because I took basically what Mike has and I submitted to CWC. But again, made sure they understood they didn't represent our final position, but I want to give them some indication of the direction we're moving. And I know several of the mayors are in the same position we are.
Yeah. So this, and I don't want to be misleading, this rendering here was in their sound wall, kind of one sheet analysis to show the visual impact that the sound wall could have, or retaining, you know, whatever that, I think it's a sound wall. But the point here is this is not what we want Wasatch to look like. We're adamantly opposed to anything that ends up, you know, looking like this, which is probably closer to their standard design approach on state highways and state roads. So a lot of our comments are trying to avoid this, and that's why, you know, we do feel an agreement or an MOU with UDOT at this point is really helpful to help any way we can to strengthen our argument against, you know, this from happening. But these are the two cross sections that are being proposed, and this would take effect essentially at Bengal Boulevard right now, because there already is a five lane cross section through the intersection onto Fort Union Boulevard, and then it narrows down approximately at Bengal Boulevard. So this would pick up from there down to the high T. So what they're clearing in the EIS is this 5-lane alternative, which you can see here is 2 travel lanes in each direction, a center median or center turn lane.
But again, what you're saying, we're talking now just right away.
Right of way.
We're not
Yeah.
talking, this is what's being designed.
No, this is the amount of
For
right of
the
way.
audience, I think that's confusing.
Yeah, standard cross section of the right of way that they would need to construct.
And they already have this right away.
Yes, with few exceptions.
Like, have they given us anything with calming features already incorporated into this? Or
Well,
they
not
just-
clearly, not in the EIS. There's another document they did
We're
that
just
does
talking
go into that.
footprint right now.
Yeah. So this essentially, and you can see here the 10-foot shared use path that would be located on the east side of the corridor. Still on street bike lanes, planted park strips, things like
But this
that.
is
It's not shown here,
space.
but yeah, this is the total space.
So that's space. So whether,
And again,
even
design.
though this may show us on asphalt, we don't want that. Maybe we want it separated and we want a thing. So we're gonna take 2 or 3 or 4
In
feet or
fact, the
whatever.
fact that we even show this, a lot of people assume that's what's being.
Yeah.
No, this is what we want to be able to provide input on.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to clarify, this is not final
Want to avoid
design
it, want to avoid it.
in any way, but this is, this just gives an example of what the difference is, say, between 5-lane alternative and imbalanced lane. The imbalanced lane, which is what they're saying they would implement in the short term, would be adding 1 lane southbound.
Main balance just means 2 and 1, not
Right.
something that switches.
No, it does not switch. It would add 1 additional lane southbound, but keep only 1 lane northbound, south of Bengal Boulevard. Everything else stays the same. And under them clearing the 5-lane alternative, what they've said is essentially this additional lane here would become extra park strip or buffer between the roadway and the shared use path.
How wide is the active transportation area?
The path itself is shown here at 10 feet with a 7-foot park strip.
The bike lane?
And then if you added the additional,
And that's 107 feet for the 5 and 95.
yeah,
for the-
this 107 is what they're clearing. So if they, under their proposal, they're implementing imbalance, but they've implemented at 107 feet. And they would just add to the dimension of the park strip and shoulder area until that extra lane, whatever is warranted, if it's ever warranted. So this is I'm going to shift slightly into the Wasatch Plan. I won't go through all these bubbles. It's impossible to read. But this again was used as the basis for a lot of our feedback and has been since we've started working with UDOT and providing feedback on the EIS. But this includes a lot of the recommendations that we just talked about: slowing traffic, consider roundabouts and traffic calming, lower speeds, mobility, parking structure at the gravel pit area, this trail system, trail connections, neighborhood access, that kind of thing. That's all included in our preferred scenario. And this obviously expands beyond the scope of UDOT into, a city trail system, connecting Highland Drive, to the south. It helps alleviate traffic in this area and provide a little more balance. But here's some of the concepts shown in our Wasatch master plan. And you can see how it differs from what UDOT has put in their draft alternative. This was our kind of mock-up of a preferred cross-section where you have a flex lane, essentially a transit lane that becomes a recreational pedestrian lane during non-peak hours, but then can be used as a transit or I think it says HOV lane during only those peak hours. But otherwise, this road would function as a 2-lane
Maybe you could
road.
resubmit this in our EIS.
Yeah, I'll include all this in there. These references will all be added. So that's it. It's a small difference, but it's key is their cross section has essentially had 2 lanes and then added some shoulder space where we were recommending 1 lane and then that flex shoulder.
Now you're showing a trail on both.
Yeah, that would require substantial right-of-way acquisition, which
They're saying the trail is just on the
East side.
east side,
But I
Now-
think that's where we want to come and say we want more pet access under.
right? But you can see the Wasatch Plan consistently references medians,
Yeah.
flex shoulder, shared use path, native landscaping. It gets at all these concepts. Again, just examples throughout the plan that point towards kind of a design palette and aesthetic that we will reference in our final letter. And then,
Have you thought, sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I think it was related to what
Okay.
you're about to say, so maybe.
So the city adopted the Wasatch Master Plan, and then after that, UDOT, using the Wasatch Master Plan as a basis, and the public input that they had received, they hired a design team to come in and do a corridor aesthetics plan, and these renderings are from that. So this is essentially, a design or implementation of a lot of the concepts that are recommended by the Wasatch Master Plan into how would these principles in our plan look if they were implemented on the ground in an actual design. So you can see these are just illustrative, and they clarify throughout their plan that the road configuration is not part of this plan. So that's why you see it switch. There's 2 lanes on some, there's 1 lane on others. They weren't committing to any sort of road configuration there, but did this to look at design. So just ways that you can have at-grade pedestrian crossings that are a little safer. Grade separated crossings, again, this would be dependent on the topography and whether above or below grade is appropriate. Enhanced crosswalks, you can see throughout, shared use trails and pathways and landscaping, and how this begins to look a lot different than the stereotypical roads that I think we all picture as a worst case scenario. Got a few more. This just shows this is kind of their typical cross section, again, only focusing on design and not number of lanes, of what it could look like if all of these design recommendations were implemented and done in a high level, how you could improve intersection areas and crossings, but also the corridor itself. To really begin to make that feel different, which would, in our opinion, make traffic drive a little slower, make it feel a little tighter, a little more snug driving through there with people and bikes and things like that, which could warrant a lower posted speed limit in the future.
Well, I know you keep saying could, but I think we need to really emphasize that once again.
Yeah.
The reason we want these traffic calming measures is to do just exactly
Right.
that.
To calm the traffic.
And then these were some photos Councilmember Michael referenced that I just pulled just as examples elsewhere in the valley. This is 13th East in Sandy. So you can see, it's a 5-lane cross section essentially with a middle median, but the design really does make a difference here in what this could look like and feel like. This one is Foothill Drive. This one does not have a median, so you can see the impact there visually. This is a few different ones. So this is 700 East. That's a much wider cross section, but that was included here. It's 6 to 8 lanes. Van Winkle Expressway and Bangor Highway has kind of different roads, different purposes on those roads, but again, examples of what we'd like to avoid through a collaborative design process with UDOT. So a lot of our comments focus on this, even though we've been told design is elsewhere, but that's kind of the summary of my items for this. So I'm happy to go wherever the council wants to go.
So I think to the council right now, Mike has summarized it. He's taken a few notes, I'm sure, from comments already. While the draft will be sent out to the council here in the next, with any modifications.
Yeah, we can have that out Friday.
Yeah,
in
I'll
the council
send it
packet.
to council communications.
I've sent a draft pretty close to this to CWC, hopefully they'll incorporate it in their position. And I know a couple of the mayors that are on CWC are very supportive of what they're saying. One mayor specifically, and I just say, well, she is supporting us.
Not sure what that is.
But yeah, I think we're on the right path, and again, emphasizing speed, the design piece. I'm really excited about the memorandum of understanding to really emphasize that, because people tend to have short-term memories. I said, well, we've meant this, but if it's in an MOU, and I've seen that in other negotiations before, to clarify some things. like that recommendation.
Can we come right out and say John Thomas committed to 35 miles per hour? and why
Except
did
that he didn't.
I think it's out there.
There's certainly
it's-
perception
yeah.
of it, but in that meeting where he said that they would look at it, and they would do their best. I actually queried him right after he said that, after all the cheering and all the clapping went down, I said, just so I understand, you didn't say you were committing to that, but that you would do what you could to see if it was a way to make it happen.
I think the word
And he
was a
concurred.
go. Was it a go?
Absolutely a goal, and it's a great one, and it should be there, but it's different. There wasn't, it wasn't a hard.
And again, it's the interpretation once again, and he definitely implied clearly that they would work towards lower speeds.
They
we
should,
don't- And we need to
absolutely.
just do everything we can in our response that makes that clear that's a high priority. I know, and I drove it 2 or 3 times over the weekend, and because we're talking about so much, first of all, how hard it was to get on Wasatch, and how fast we're going, and how fast I was going. I said, let's see how fast we go just to keep up with traffic. And I was over 50.
Can we include some winding?
Well, that's part of the traffic calming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be part of.
Yeah.
And what
I would love to see
I'll
it.
include ideas rather than saying et cetera.
Part of that would be access to the property purchase, right? I mean, when you meander, you get out of that
It's design.
corridor, right?
Maybe.
And one of the
But- but-
medians you showed on your previous pictures, it shows one of the median, concrete medians just weaving like this. Should you put that turn and that site will change the speed.
Yeah.
After that.
Certainly hope so.
You're talking about median.
Because that would be sound too. That would change sound, problem.
Yeah.
Even the landscape will affect that.
So, Mayor, did you, was there any benefit in acknowledging or referencing the CWC pillars?
Yes, because I used it in, what Mike and I put together for CWC, I referenced the pillars. I think it's a good idea to represent those again.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, because I did on mine. Yeah. Yeah, good catch. Good
Yeah.
catch.
I just think the visitor user capacity is just all sort of plays into, I think, our flex.
And that'll be part of CWC's focus too, is the visitor capacity studies and those things that we're doing. Catherine really focused on that.
Okay.
I think that's the last part of what I do.
Comments are due, I believe, on September 3rd, so we'll send a draft out, get any additional input, and then clean that up and have that ready to send in a couple weeks.
Okay, and anything that comes to mind between now and then, get to Mike directly.
Yeah.
Well, that was showed up in a lot of the comments. There's nowhere in the EIS or even in the design things where it mentions the word freeway.
No, it's, I mean, it's formal classification. It's like a category 1
I mean,
state
it's-
highway.
It's a highway, but it's not a freeway. It's not an I-15. It's not a 215. It was never going to be. It was never anything like that. Because that term is repeatedly.
Boulevard.
Yeah, boulevard is the key word, right? I mean,
Well,
doesn't it have different.
but that's not-
My point being is even in the public comments, there was a lot of use of the word freeway that gives people a completely different perception
Yeah.
of what's actually occurring.
What would be the main reason they would fight us on trying to do the calming features? Is it mainly money? Or what's their
We're not sure
motivation?
they're even fighting this. It's
Well,
just-
not fighting, let's say our
They
suggestions,
build highways.
right?
That's their focus.
They move
Moving
people.
people.
So,
They move
so
people.
Carlos even said, it's a paradigm shift even to look at this, but he's verbally told several people that I understand that's what we need to do here. We need to change our thinking. Now, the challenge of getting them to put into practice what they're saying, because they're not used to doing it, it comes to the cost of medians and landscaping and trails and all those things. That's a change in what they're doing. But it seems like there is some quite a bit of verbiage from him and others that says, yeah, we understand it has to happen. Now, who pays for it all?
Well, I mean, I think that's probably where some of that 10 million that you were talking about was to go to that. And they agreed to do this, a similar kind of thing at Park City as well on one of their projects, like, let's take the local community into, and that is a paradigm shift where they,
This is where
Work
once we
for years
design,
and years
the
and years and
legislature get involved, and we'll want to be using our lobbyists to focus up there. Because this is not just, even though it impacts us greater than anyone else, it's definitely a regional issue. But it impacts us the most. So the legislature needs to be involved in the governor as far as prioritizing funding, but the design and the impact is with us.
Yeah.
So this is a start, and then we stay on it.
Maybe we could even mention, Mike, if Salt Lake's entertaining a 2030 Olympic bid, this will be the corridor that's the gateway to the canyons. It needs to be, wow, beautiful, stunning. calm.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of Olympics in these two canyons. I'm not sure they're still built for that part of
No,
it.
Residual though.
there's
We have a lot of residual.
But the point, to your
Visitors.
point,
Yeah.
is when people came to visit and go to Park City Olympics
And
and
they
the
came back.
Rec Center, well, they spend a lot of time while they're here
Midway is
visiting
not the
those
same
areas.
town it used to be.
And the rec centers, yeah. So
Tim,
it's still,
Is there another meeting that our staff's all attending?
Other than. I think we've
all right,
got some issues.
we have a couple more, maybe if we're quick, we can get through this. We'll try. Thank you, everyone. Let's move to the ADU discussion, and maybe we can just hit the highlights.
Yeah.
We've been through this many times.
Yeah, couple meetings ago, I gave this introduction, but in a nutshell, HB 82 was adopted this past year that is requiring all cities to allow ADUs in single-family zones. So we've been over these restrictions. I can answer any questions, but I'm going to kind of skip through this. But local authority is very limited. We can do a certain number of things, but it's a small amount of local authority that we retain. So as was kind of directed by the council last time, we've used our previous ADU ordinance that was not adopted as a basis for this updated ordinance, and just made the changes that we felt were no longer allowed by the state legislation. So here are the key elements of the updated draft ordinance. And I say IADU here, that means internal ADU, which means it's part of the footprint of the home. It's not a detached structure. And that's the only thing that the state legislation allows that preempts us on is those internal ADUs. Detached is still up to us as a city to regulate how we want. But IADU, it would, under this ordinance, will now be allowed in any single family residential zone, except on lots less than 6,000 square feet in size. We don't have a ton of those. We have a few planned unit developments. I think Giverny has some sub 6,000 lots. Some of those developments do. But that is one of the pieces of local authority we have, is to prohibit them on smaller lots. This was also recommended by the council last time. We've kept our language in for detached ADUs as conditional uses with much stricter parking standards, strict setback and building requirements. So these would require 2 parking stalls, non-tandem, not in the front yard.
Wait a minute, is that just for detached?
Only for detached. So we've kept our strict regulations in place for detached.
So if it's attached or if it's a basement, it can be in tandem?
No, and I'll get to that, but it's not 2, it's only 1.
Yeah, okay.
One
But
additional?
yes, but the way detached ADUs right now are designed is functionally, they would only ever be feasible on much larger lots, which is where you would tend to see those anyways, because you have to have a lot of setback.
Yeah, what on this, like 25 feet?
So
on
what
the
we're
side or
saying is
something?
you have to meet accessory building height and massing standards, which is a shorter building,
Okay.
but you have to meet primary structure setbacks, which is going to be,
8 feet. and-
well, maybe on an R18 lot, 10 feet, 12 feet, 25 to 30 from the backyard. So you have to have a really large property to accommodate a detached ADU. You won't be seeing these in a lot of standard R18 neighborhoods because they wouldn't fit.
Or the other option is we take that language out completely and just
You
not
can
allow.
prohibit them altogether. That's up to the council. We are requiring for all ADUs license, site inspection and building permit if additional work is needed. And the additional work needed will be the greatest extent allowed by state code into what improvements we can require. For every ADU, we can require updated egress and bedroom windows and things like that. But if they're constructing, new bedrooms where they didn't exist before, that will obviously require permits and inspections. And then the license will be required to be renewed annually and updated if there's ever a change in ownership or anything.
What's the cost for that license?
That's not been determined. It's just the administrative cost of a license though. And we may need to bring that back as a fee schedule item. The site inspection and building permit will be per the building code schedule. So the minimum site inspection fee is about $50. So every ADU will be required that. one additional non-tandem parking stall required for internal ADUs.
That's fine.
So we can only require as a city one additional parking stall in it, plus the 2 that are required for the home. And we are saying that that one additional stall cannot be located directly in front of or behind the minimum 2 required for the property. It could be behind a third car garage stall, but not part of the primary. Owner occupancy is required, and we're requiring an affidavit signed that will be recorded to acknowledge that. Only 1 ADU per lot, no separate utility meters, no short-term rentals in ADUs. They're all long-term owner occupied properties.
30
And then-
days or more usage.
Yes. The new license required after any ownership change, obviously to ensure continued owner occupancy. So if someone gets an ADU and then sells their property, the buyer they can still operate it, but they have to come in and renew that.
Well, you said no short-term rentals and ADUs for, you said 30 days?
Well, 30 days is what, long-term.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the
That's-
30 days.
That's the difference between
Yeah.
short and long term.
If it's a week, it's called short-term.
That's short term.
Anything less than the 30 days.
Yep.
Ownership change. Yes, I understand if you sell house. A lot of times people, certainly as they may be getting to the point in their life where they may have extra rooms or have a basement that they may want to do. The ownership of their home changes from themselves as a joint trust to a irrevocable trust. That
We would just have
ownership
them,
change,
that'd be a minor, just an update to the document we
we'd
have
have to
on
let them
file.
know, or something would still be required to get a
Yeah,
new license.
I would say any change to the legal ownership, we just need to verify that it's still the owner living on site. If it's a kind of
A trustee of the trust or something like that.
a little procedural change like that, that's not a big deal, but
Well, I just appreciate all the work we've done in previous years regarding ADUs that takes care of all the life safety things. And if these,
We'll be able to get this done in a couple weeks instead of
well, rather than-
18 months.
Yeah, and so with the parking issue, which has been the biggest concern, because if you do it in tandem, then the owner just says park in the road. So this requires that additional parking, which is critical.
so this went to planning commission. There was, I think, only one public comment we received, but the commission unanimously recommended approval to the council. So you have the draft ordinance in your packet. We just need to bring it back. The state legislation takes effect October 1st. So we prefer to have this in place
And
by
that's
then.
not on for action tonight. This is
No,
just
it's
discussion.
just work session discussion tonight.
Okay.
It's ready.
Ready to go, and we meet that requirement, and again, it's an excellent.
I
Consider,
wish they would give us money for our roads the way they gave us this.
yeah, really. What
It's easier to give you intangibles.
What's gonna be interesting is, I would bet we have hundreds of these already.
Yeah.
See how, if people come now, register them, or if they just continue to operate the way we are. So that's.
I expect they probably would, but I think if you run into an enforcement or a question about it, say, you know what, you need a license for
There it
this.
is, yeah, at least we give them an
There's
opportunity.
pathway now.
Yeah,
And most
you're right.
people would, okay, well, I'll get the license.
Yeah.
You
So
may
then
have
do
some
we have to
stubborn.
implement a fee, a fine?
It would, well, usually if someone's building a structure, say without a permit,
No, but I mean, if it's built, right, yeah.
yeah, we would have them come in and rectify the situation. And if they don't do it in enough time, then it would go to the citation process.
Which is covered under.
So usually there's a warning period to
So
come into
what's the
compliance.
So what will the citation be if you have an ADU, you don't register it, and somebody's occupying it?
Well, I think what we would do is say, hey, you need to come in, you have a certain amount of time to get this in compliance.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then it goes through the code enforcement court citation process where the judge would determine the final fee.
So it's like short-term rental issue.
It would be the same, yeah, nuisances, short-term rentals, parking, all the nuisances.
At least there is the pathway now, short-term rental, there's not so many.
Yeah, that's the key difference there.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Matt, Ferguson Canyon parking lot and the public park.
Yes, sir. So Mike's gonna show some slides here. We held a public,
We're gonna talk about the rezone and the open house.
oh, did you wanna?
I can do that.
Talked about
This is,
the
it's very straightforward. The rezone is just so our city project is in compliance with our own land use and zoning
Yeah.
maps. So we just it's just cleanup to make sure the zoning reflects
And we talked about this a minute ago.
the use. Yeah,
I
so that's all that is.
I think we're good on that. That's very straightforward.
We held the public hearing, again, unanimous recommendation of approval from the commission.
All right, Matt, now the canyon and
Yeah, so what we held, per direction of the council, we held an open house to present this design and layout to the public to receive input from that. You have seen the written input that we've got. It was in your, that we received, I'm sorry. It's in your packet. Some were emailed, there were a few left there for us. And generally speaking, I'm just going to try to sum up the main concerns that I heard and when we were visiting. The big concern is safety was a big concern. Traffic on Prospector Drive, adding, the thought that we might be adding more cars to that or people coming to this area. The other concern that came out was the size of the parking lot or the number of stalls that are in this project. And the final concern was what type of fencing would we be seeing around this property. Now, that being said, overall, the project itself for the concept of the park was received very well. We had a lot of good input, but it was more of a, these are my concerns. If you're going to do this, what can be done to help with those concerns? We did have one or two that said, don't build the park. I even had one that said, put up multifamily housing. We'd rather have that. Okay, but that's one out of those that we spoke to. Mike might have more folks that he spoke to as well, or emailed back and forth. But what we would like to do tonight with you as the council, you've seen this concept quite a few times through the process. Just for the public's information, this is over off about I believe it's about 8200, 8300 South in Wasatch, right off Prospector. Started out as a large parking area, and over time and through changes of city philosophy and parking and transit that we've gone through, it came to this point. And also with our agreement with the county that we build a park in this area or build open space in this area versus doing any other type of development. That's the reason you saw the rezone and that take place. Now, to help mitigate some of those concerns that we've talked about, the first thing I'll just point out right now is we will go in and on the west side of Prospector where there are no homes, nobody's fronting that section, we will put no parking or in red curb along that.
where it shows on there then?
Yeah, we see the long line, the long red line.
Solid line.
The solid red line, yes, correct. The dots are the trail path that just indicate getting up to,
Pedestrian block, yeah.
yes, correct, getting up to Ferguson Canyon Trailhead. But we'll go in, and one of the concerns, and I think to help mitigate some of the concerns on traffic, because that is a 25-foot wide asphalt road, and it's just a chance to leave one side open so cars are able to maneuver in and out through there without being blocked by line of sight with
So
parked
can they
cars.
park on the other side then,
That's permit park, no, I believe the other side's permit parking.
based upon our previous?
I believe so. I don't recall. I know that it goes up. Mike might know a little better than I do on the permit side. But
Yeah, permit parking starts about
yeah, if I were somewhere in there.
right in here. I think parking's limited even on this side.
Yeah, it is limited
Right
over
now,
there.
correct.
Those are permit parking down on those condos at the bottom. That's one thought. Now, the other reason we would like council's input, and I know we're short on time, but we have to come to a decision on materials of what you want to see as like the sign layouts, how, what kind of materials we're talking about. There is a retaining wall that will be put in on the east side, the west side of the parking lot, between the parking lot and Wasatch Boulevard. It's a fairly large wall that will have to go in. What kind of face are we looking at for something like that? And then just generally speaking, and we also would like for you to help us out with getting a name of this park. as well, as you think about it and have that discussion. So Mike has a couple of slides here. We'll just kind of go through them really quickly. These are some things we brought forward before. You talked about on the front or facing Wasatch doing a split rail type fence or a wooden type fence. These are a few options, as you can see. There's and this fence, we're told, because of some of the use that will go on in here, needs to be about 5 feet tall at least. And so behind that, you'll see there's some wire, but it gives the aesthetics of looking into the park, and it won't have this chain link or this fence blocking the view driving down through Wasatch. We also have the discussion of the signs, and I know PTOS has reviewed some materials for signs, and they've come up with some ideas. This is kind of the general idea of what they're looking for to keep it.
Yeah, I like that.
And if y'all are okay
But
with
see, that's the
this,
same look I'd have in the fencing.
right, and that's what they're trying to tie in, the fencing with
You had
this.
one on your last slide in the middle, which is more that color, and the second row down, and more that one, yeah,
Okay,
the darker color.
yeah,
Okay,
Because the wire behind it becomes invisible.
correct.
I would surprised it has to be 5 feet.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can certainly look at it, but we're getting recommended to 5 feet. So anyway, so the PTOS has looked at that, and they went with, I don't know exactly which fence setup they went with, but they do like the wood. They like that darker, and therefore they made the recommendation for the signs based on that to kind of tie it in together. Just to give you an idea, the main park sign going in is the one on top right. The rules as you get into the parking lot and start walking into the park area itself, that will be the sign you'll be greeted with, that style. And the other is trailhead marking signs to point the way up to Ferguson Canyon. So that's where that
How many
is.
parking stalls? In this
There are 52,
One of the
53.
letters said it was 70 plus, so we know we don't.
There, yeah, and explaining that to folks while we were there, remember, this thing started out at 140, if you'll recall, and it kept getting knocked down, and we are pretty much at where we can be based on funding and what we're doing this with. So we've taken it as really, I believe, as far as we can go.
And somebody suggested a privacy fence.
There was, if Mike, do you mind going back to, somebody did suggest along the private properties, putting up, yeah, you can see it right here, along the properties on the east side of the park, putting in, we have right now a chain link going in. We would still, I would still recommend, or we would still recommend the chain link, just based on the topography of what's out there. If you go out there, that hillside is very steep, and you're going up 70 plus feet. So from the homes or from the ground,
Should be black vinyl. So-
black vinyl,
Or green.
black
Or
chain
green.
link.
Do they make a green vinyl?
Well, they do, but black is the one by research says is most invisible.
Yeah, coated, but it's powder coated, black
Powder-
coated,
black-
yes,
black
correct.
coated.
So not the privacy slats, just. keep
The
it-
privacy slats, we were hoping to get,
You can see them too much?
Huh?
You can see them too much? You can-
Yeah, they're high maintenance.
I
and
don't,
Especially because it's on a hillside.
there you go, I don't
You
think
walk
you're,
up 5 feet over the top of it. And so what you see through it is just the greenery behind it. So it's.
yeah, and to
Shrubbery
get
and that.
down to
Yeah,
that
it's
part,
more for
I don't know if
dogs.
you have Google Earth, you can pull up just a real quick picture. Anyway, Mike's gonna try to pull up a real quick picture on Google Earth to show you something, but this is what we're here for tonight. We're ready to move forward with bidding this project. If there are no major changes that you see as a council that you would like, I mean, you have the comments, you have those things. We will come back with the final fence look. For you to look at in the next council meeting. We'll come back with the final sign design for you to have, and those things, like I said, oh, and we probably got to look at the bathroom and the wall. So sorry,
I go there.
I
The
jumped.
only one that's
past you.
uncertain to me is still the retaining wall.
Yeah, so here we go. Let's go. We have some thoughts on that. Okay, so right now, there is a restroom in there that will be going in the park. What's that?
Yeah, no
That's
character to that, baby.
No, not a lot of character. It's meant to blend in, and
Utility.
quite
Institutional.
honestly, we've got a couple of options here. It's a split face,
Split face is good because it's block and it's.
block, yeah. So it gives a little texture to it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to see more color, we can bring back some other options, but we
Well,
try to
even
stay extremely
Split face is-
neutral
you
on
get
this.
color- You get color in split face too.
Yeah, you can, but we've tried to stay extremely neutral based on the surroundings and what's in there. But if you want to see another couple of color options, we do have a little time on that to bring those back to you. That's one of the thoughts tonight. And then the other is the retaining wall itself. If you'll recall, there is that retaining wall. You can see in the bottom left what it would look like along Wasatch. So there's a couple of things. What design of you, because I understand I wasn't at the last meeting when you discussed this. You're opposed to just a flat
Concrete.
concrete, so we've tried to put in there some options of texture. Now, this is mold form. You pour, the wall's still poured. This is just a form behind the wall that creates this shape.
Yeah, so is the wall around City Hall, but it looks
Yes, yes,
quite
Correct.
nicer because it was.
yeah. So it gives a little
textured.
texture. It gives it a little
So
different
there'll
look.
be landscaping in front of the wall,
In front of the wall will be the walking trail, the Wasatch.
right next to it.
Yeah, there will be some space in there, and
As long as there's some
Seen the
texture,
cross
that's not a cold slab of concrete.
well, yeah, and we can do something like this. Or the question would be, are you looking for something that's like linear? Or are we looking for something that's a
On the
little,
left, it stands out to me a little more than the linear one, but.
That does, I don't mind the one on the bottom because that
Yeah.
looks.
And then the ones like we did on 30th East, that cost prohibitive.
trying to remember the,
blocks.
Up the hill.
yeah, it is very, this is,
Those
we
are the
are,
best, obviously.
yeah, yeah, that's the MSE walls, which, and so this is, like I said, this is a retaining, cast in place retaining wall, and we're trying to give it some character
Yeah, just
and
some
keep our
character, some
costs
texture, and
down.
again, you could always, if you had any landscape in front, it would really help too, but you've
Sure.
got the walkway right up next to
Yeah, and a lot of that when
it. How high is it?
there's points that it's 8 feet. It's about the size, if you look at the one
It's like a sound wall.
to the north of it,
Oh, that's,
I don't know if you've ever even noticed it, the north of this, up against there's it's about the same height.
Is there any greenery or is it walkway right up to the wall?
I don't know, this is UDOT's, this is that section Mike was showing you. So anyway, here's the
Yeah, when you
picture
got
of the
8 foot-
homes.
You got an 8-foot wall, if there's even some native grasses that are just right there in front, anything to
That would help
stop
so
that,
much.
wow.
Yeah.
But that's,
Just to help you understand the homes that are backing this project, those are the homes. And there's the ground. So putting up a 6-foot privacy fence at the base down there,
That's so-
it's hard to even,
Matt, is that bathroom heated and open?
it will
year-round?
be, we will design it that way. It's going to be a decision from the council if you would like to keep it open year round. Y'all did make the decision on Mount View to keep it open year round, if that's the case. Yeah, there's the other one, it's just down the road from it. And so
Yeah, that's nice.
so if you're looking for, like I said, a linear type wall, we'll find that and bring that back to you. Or if you're looking for more of a broken up,
Christine, I would like to see the
Type.
district,
Oh gosh, more options.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
nothing
no, I can bring back more options. I'm just saying, if you're looking for linear, I can bring back more linear options.
That's what you'd
Yeah,
already
go
did
back,
on it.
that's what you showed us, right? I don't see your language.
The previous slide.
Linear.
Yeah,
is
linear would be
he's
like
driving,
the-
not me.
On the
Yeah.
right.
Linear block type
Versus
look
the other.
versus.
Yeah, I kind of like the other
standard.
ones, but.
I like the one on the left.
This here.
Yeah, I would, if you give
So
me
we can
those-
bring back options on that.
But I think what you're hearing from us is that we think we're there to proceed, but we understand you'll bring us back some more detail on like the fencing, this wall, or what the
Yeah,
rest
just-
looks like, just to keep us informed as we answer questions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, we will be going out to bid on the park portion. Hopefully, we'll be opening it in October, the 1st of October. So you'll have something in front of you. So we will, between now and the next council, try to tighten this up so we can get a final decision on.
We all understand the opposite.
I just have one.
Please.
One thing that I heard repeatedly that night, I think we did that, and we spoke about this after. So you know what I'm about to say, I'm sure. But, so the parking went from like 145 to 70 to 54.
Well, down to about 65 and then down to 54 or 53 right now where we are.
So we've made great progress there. I think a lot of people's concerns are whether this is going to be used as a parking ride in the wintertime for people parking there. And so I know you've gone back and forth with WRC, but is there a way to limit it to something closer to 40? I know that's hard to do and we've gone back and forth, but could we at least try? That seemed to be probably the biggest comment I heard. Most people said, as a resident of Cottonwood Heights, I like this. As a resident of this neighborhood, I don't like it. But if you could do X, Y, and Z.
How many of them are handicapped?
There's 4 in, we meet code, there's 4 in the parking lot itself. And up top on
Yeah,
Ferguson
in the
Canyon,
parking-
we're
the parking
leaving
lot.
those alone, the ADAs that are up there.
So
Question
So
is how many, when they're hiking Ferguson, how many cars are lined up those roads, I guess?
from what I'm being told, we get quite a few that are lining the road when they're up hiking and going through the neighborhoods. I don't go up there and see that enough, but from what the information we received at the meeting, that's why we discussed the no parking along Prospector to drive the vehicles into the parking lot and then hiking
Give
up to.
Well, yeah,
I think most people are saying that during COVID, yes, they were lining the streets and there were probably maybe sometimes 40 stalls, but since then, they haven't seen that volume.
I don't know.
I don't use that canyon much myself.
no, I think we've come a long way and by adding the 4 handicap in that lot as well, we're down to 50 that are public. That's not very many stalls if you really add it.
And you can make wider stalls,
Yeah, good with it.
paint them, have a little bit so that when you open your door, you're not slamming the next door.
What about
Costco
bike
stalls.
parking? Does anyone cycle to
Good
the
point.
area?
Bike,
What's that?
bicycle parking is a good idea in there too, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have things of that nature in there.
So I'm not getting any support. Okay, I'll just tell,
I'd say-
I'll tell my residents that.
Well, I hope you would emphasize what it was to what it is.
We did, we
Yes,
emphasized
yeah,
that
we
quite a
did.
lot.
And then
Yeah.
also too, I think too, another meeting point is appropriate signage. I think you mentioned, not just the signage that gets us up to Ferguson, but also really signage that we have the right to say it's not a parking ride.
there's not a place to.
Yeah, we
ride
won't
there.
advertise, this won't be put on any county information, like, county has a county map of all this. It'll be a
Like,
very
not bus
local,
stop.
we're building it as a very local.
But do we have the authority to put signage that says this is not a parking ride?
I don't, I'm gonna turn to these 2
Well, it's
gentlemen.
something we
I
can
wish
look
I could
at
tell you.
because,
Question.
anything to deter.
But
Don't
there's
you
not
need
a
a bus
stop
stop?
there, is there?
No.
No, there's
No,
not.
but
a
There'd have
stop.
to be a friend, say, I'm gonna park and
And
I'll pick you up.
meet you at the Ferguson Canyon Road for
Right,
parking,
right.
just like at the swamp lot or whatever you want to call it.
I guess I would invite you all to try, if you haven't, drive up and look at it. I think, and I think if you've looked at your packets, Dave Hancock is the resident that I mentioned that said, as a resident of Cottonwood Heights, I think this is a great idea. As a neighbor, I'm not so sure, but he put a lot of thought and took a lot of pictures and laid out the case for it. I might just invite you to do that. And
Yeah.
maybe you can revisit
We
that.
got pictures in the back.
Mayor, if I may,
Oh, we
just
gotta
to
go.
try to, real quick, I know we've got to get out of here, but just try to answer that question. We can, certainly and speaking to Tim, we can talk about that, but at the level I'm working at, I've had these discussions and this is where I am, or what I've been told on the number of stalls. I don't know, so.
I'd love to see a response to
Yes.
to Mr. Hancock maybe about that.
Maybe that's, we're coming back You've got to come back for a moment on the closed session, make sure you're up to speed on a piece of real estate. So we'll go in and we'll reconvene at 7:05. And then we'll get through our business area, we'll come back and reconvene a work session for about 15 minutes. We'll do 10 minutes and we'll see if there's any final questions on this. And then we can
Is the
go into the closed session.
Sixth Amendment on tonight's action item?
So we'll-
The zone.
Yeah. Okay, we're adjourned.
We adjourn our work session and go to the business meeting.
Reconvene at-
There's a
All in
second.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
The second pour of water bottle.
He's at 7:05, so you got.